Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Emily Hiles, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is able seaman Sophie Marriott. After months of stalemate, Australian, New Zealand, British and Indian troops attempted to break the deadlock on the Gallipoli Peninsula by launching a series of assaults against Turkish strongpoints. The battles that followed were the largest and most costly of the Gallipoli campaign. They ended in heartbreaking failure and produced heavy losses on both sides. Many sites of the bloody struggle, Lone Pine, the Neck, Chinook Bear and Hill 60, became familiar names in Australia and New Zealand. Today, we commemorate the 3rd Light Horse Brigade's charge at the Neck, part of the wider breakout actions by Commonwealth forces during the August offensive. The attack led to more than 370 casualties, with more than 200 killed. This evening, we warmly welcome Mr. John King, President of the Returned Services League of Australia, ACT branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Club Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of 2 schools from Queensland, Greenvale State School and Wallumbilla State School. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult party, attack, jump! Catapult party, present, up!
Australians, oh let us rejoice, for we are one and free, with golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catapult party, shoulder, out! Catapult party, order, out!
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, flowers of the forest, wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Thomas James Heller. Thomas Heller was born on the 12th of November 1879 in Port Pirie, South Australia. Known as Tom, he was one of 12 children born to shipwright John Heller and his wife Catherine. Tom grew up around Adelaide and Broken Hill before moving to England with his family. They settled in Cornwall and Tom attended school in the riverside town of Fowey. His family returned to Australia some years later and settled in the Perth suburb of Northam. Tom found employment managing the ironmongery department of a local store and became an active participant in the local community. He joined the Light Horse and held the rank of second lieutenant, trained junior and senior cadets, and was one of the organisers of the Rifle Club. On the 11th of March 1903, he married Laura Louisa Thackra in a small ceremony at St John's Church. He and his wife went on to have their first child, Arthur, in December 1906, and 3 more children over the years that followed. When the First World War broke out in 1914, Tom Heller volunteered almost immediately. He applied for commission, which was granted in October, and allocated to A Squadron of the 10th Light Horse Regiment with the rank of lieutenant. After completing a short period of training, Heller embarked for active service, sailing from Fremantle on the troop ship Maryborough on the 8th of February 1915. After several weeks at sea, Lieutenant Heller arrived in Egypt, where Allied forces were preparing for an attack on the Dardanelles. As light horse units were considered unsuitable, Heller and his men spent time training and assisting with logistical tasks as forces began landing on Gallipoli. From camp, Heller wrote to a home friend, "We are camped at Heliopolis until the regiment is likely to leave. I am on the Imperial Embarkation Staff and with 9 others supervise the landing and unloading of trains and boats of all troops and their equipment. Sometimes we are going for our lives, starting at 4 a.m. and if lucky, finishing the next morning, and then for a week, nothing to do. Since being here, we have handled close to 100,000 troops and their horses, etc. We now have the wounded returning. I suppose we shall soon be sending some of them home. Poor buggers." In July 1915, Heller's unit embarked for Gallipoli, deployed without horses, and landed at Anzac Cove a few days later, taking up positions in the front line. For the first few weeks, Heller and his men were involved in defensive actions as Allied units fought to hold the ground that had been won at enormous cost. By this stage, however, fighting on Gallipoli had descended into a stalemate. Allied forces launched a major offensive designed to take control of the high ground to the north and inland of Anzac Cove. It was believed that this would allow Allied troops to move across the peninsula, cutting Turkish forces in half. A series of feints were organised to distract and divert the Turkish troops from the main attack. The charge at the neck, the narrow bridge of land that stretched between Russell's Top and Baby 700 across Monash Valley, was one such planned distraction. In the early hours of the 7th of August 1915, the men of the 10th Light Horse Regiment waited for the artillery bombardment intended to neutralise the Turkish machine guns opposite. At 4 a.m, a Navy destroyer opened fire on the neck, but although it fired for half an hour, it had little effect. The bombardment ended 7 minutes early, but the men were ordered not to charge until the appointment time of the attack. The Turkish troops who had taken shelter during the bombardment used this time to man their positions, readying themselves for an attack. The resulting battle was a disaster. Waves of men were cut down by machine gun and rifle fire as they attempted to reach enemy trenches. Major John Antle, who was in command of the 3rd Light Horse Brigade, rejected an initial proposal to call off the attack. By the time cancellation was again suggested, a 4th line of men had charged, meeting with murderous machine gun fire. The 10th Light Horse Regiment suffered nearly 130 casualties. Among the dead was Lieutenant Tom Heller. News of his death reached Australia and his family and community mourned the loss. In tribute, Heller's wife placed a short notice in the Northam Advertiser. Greater sacrifice can no man make than to give his life for his country. Tom Heller was 36 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Thomas James Heller, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in hope of a better world.
Careful, buddy. Shoulder up.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Careful, buddy. Present. Up. Careful, buddy. Shoulder up.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Careful, buddy. Outward. Turn. Careful, buddy. Quick. Watch.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozier or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.